Old Lady Ghost encountered Old Lady BY. Please, everyone, lend an ear. Young Hi's house is getting knocked down to be rebuilt, so today he's got his mates round to help clear out the odds and ends and take them down to his grandparents' place at the end of the street. They've been thick as thieves since they were nippers, starkers and splashing about in the rain, so if one of them's got a job on, all it takes is a shout and the whole lot of them are there, pronto. Oi, hold your horses, you're scoffing already? Got to graft before you can grab, mate. Hi, the greedy guts, was chomping away at a pork roll while shoveling all the books off the shelves and into a cardboard box. The state of you, all gob and no gobble. Huey shook his head and gave a rueful smile, bending down to gather up the books that Hi had been using as a makeshift workstation. Are ghosts real? Music, the lot of them spun round as one, staring at Huey in utter bewilderment. Out of the blue, his rabbiting on about ghosts and gowls, and it gave everyone the willies. Watch it, mate, you'll summon one just mentioning them. Nah, nothing like that. I'm just reading the title of this book. Huey held the cover aloft. Hi, seeing the confusion, chipped in to explain. Yeah, I ordered that ages ago. The author prints them himself and sells them to his readers. Years ago, I was dead keen on his ghost stories, so I ordered one as a memento, a bit of support, like. It's a gripping read, full of twists and turns. He writes about his spiritual experiences and the tales he's heard, then ends with the question, are ghosts real? So, what do you lot reckon? Huey opened the first page and posed the question, causing the whole crew to pause, ponder, and then turn their gaze toward who was stood by the door. And the reason for this somewhat tangible response was that, over 15 years ago, who had been the main character in a spine-chilling story that shook the entire village. Back then, they were all in primary school, led astray by the older lads in the area, and there wasn't a single mischievous thing they hadn't tried. From the usual tricks, like ringing doorbells and legging it, to starting scraps with the kids from the next street, to proper daft stunts like spying on couples getting frisky or doing a bit of rhythmic gymnastics down on the beach, and then nicking all their clothes and shoes. But the most legendary escapade of all was the time they got their comeuppance after a brainless foray into robbing a spirit house, a tale that became famous throughout the entire area and remains so to this day. Robbing a spirit house was a local expression that the older boys had passed on to them. Robbing meant stealing. A spirit house was a small shrine where people would place offerings to the spirits. In this coastal village in central Vietnam, at that time, pretty much every house had a little shrine like that outside. That day, it was the full moon, and it was the summer holidays. It was sweltering, so they were all hanging around at the crossroads, listening to the older boys boast about their mischievous exploits. Oi, it's the full moon tonight, fancy robbing a spirit house with us. The younger lads were still wet behind the ears, and the term robbing a spirit house drew blank stares. Eh? What's robbing a spirit house, T? It means nicking the fruit and sweets people offer at the shrine outside their houses. You know what I'm on about, yeah. The gang's eyes lit up and they nodded eagerly. They were all ears when T-Ho mentioned fruit and sweets, things that were a real luxury back then, and not something poor kids like them got to eat regularly. Right, it's the full moon, they're bound to have made offerings. We'll wait till it's a bit later, when it's quiet. You lot follow me. And I'm telling you, normal fruit's rubbish, but fruit robbed from a spirit house tastes amazing. Must be because it's free. Th concluded, making them all burst out laughing with glee. Hi's gang were no strangers to pinching fruit from neighbors' gardens, and every fence bore the marks of their escapades. But robbing a spirit house was new territory. Curiosity, that dangerous beast, was about to lead them into troubled waters, and they were about to learn a valuable lesson about the pitfalls of life. Back then, Hi's village was very rural. Houses were few and far between, and fields and ponds were dotted all around. The whole long road was lit by just 2 lampposts that cast a dim, eerie yellow light. So, whose house are we robbing later, mate? Who inquired? T-Ho turned to Long Mom and nodded with a sly grin. Let's go to old Mrs. Saw's house down the bottom of the street. You lot haven't been there, have you? Her spirit house is out in the garden, nice and easy to get to. It's just an old couple, no one to keep an eye out. They'll be fast asleep by now. By 9 p.m., a few houses had already switched off their lights and gone to bed early to get out into the fields in the morning. Seeing that the time was ripe, T-Ho gave the signal for the gang to set off. Mrs. Saw's house was at the bottom of the street, down a small dirt track hidden behind a large bamboo thicket. The full moon cast a faint, silvery light, throwing long, wobbly shadows onto the path. In stark contrast to their earlier swagger, T-Ho pulled up when they were about 10 paces from Mrs. Saw's house and turned to whisper to Hi's gang, "Right, you lot see the spirit house by the star apple tree." Hi's gang followed T-Ho's pointing finger, looking through the rickety, rusty iron gate. They felt a shiver of apprehension as they took in the scene. The interior was cloaked in an unsettling gloom that shrouded the two-roomed cottage. The spirit house stood on a stack of 6 hollow bricks next to the large star apple tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze, the leaves rustling softly under the faint yellow light from the porch, casting strange, wriggling patterns on the ground like the outstretched arms of a spooky apparition. T-Ho gestured with his chin. "Right, I can see a fruit platter in there. The fence is tiny and she doesn't have a dog, so nothing to worry about. It looks a bit creepy, mate. Maybe we should try another house." The younger boys looked uneasy and exchanged nervous glances. Long Mom then went for a bit of psychological warfare. "You lot scared? If you are, go home. Don't ever ask to hang out with us again." Who always liked to put on a bit of an act, wasn't going to take that lying down. "Course I'm not scared, leave it to me." Long Mom, knowing that his bait had been swallowed, nodded smugly and instructed Who on how to sneak in. The fence around Mrs. Saw's house wasn't very high, but it was topped with broken glass, so the only option was to climb over the rusty iron gate. With a bit of help from T-Ho, who was soon over the other side. Having had plenty of experience pinching fruit from neighbors' gardens, he cautiously looked around and slowly crept forwards. The further he went, the more shadowy it became, as the dense bushes blocked out the weak light from the porch of Mrs. Saw's house. When he was just 10 paces from the spirit house, the branches of the star apple tree suddenly began to rustle, making Who jump and crouch down. Music, Who went rigid as he heard a piercing screech. Trembling, he looked up at the star apple tree and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring right at him. Who was so terrified that he didn't dare breathe. He couldn't move forwards, and he couldn't shout. All he could do was sit there reciting prayers, keeping a close eye on the slightest movement of those terrifying eyes. Before he could figure out what to do, something suddenly swooped down from the dense branches, heading straight for where he was hiding. Who, scared stiff, ducked down, covered his head with his arms, and his heart pounded like a drum. The sinister thing whizzed past and let out a chilling cry right behind him. Who took a deep breath, mustered all his courage, slowly raised his head and looked back, only to see an owl perched in the custard apple tree. He breathed a sigh of relief. It was just an owl. All that fuss over nothing. Annoyed, he stood up, shook his head to clear his thoughts, picked up a rock and threw it at the custard apple tree. But the owl didn't flinch. It just stared at Who with its piercing, glowing eyes before finally flying off. Who grinned triumphantly, dusted himself down and slowly walked towards the spirit house. Now that he got a good look, he could see that, as well as the fruit platter, there were a few packets of biscuits and sweets. All those fancy treats that they only got money to buy 1 or 2 of every now and again. Who was overjoyed. He pulled up his t-shirt and stuffed everything inside, grinning from ear to ear. He pictured his mates looking up to him and felt a surge of pride. But just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly heard a voice behind him. "Oi!" Who went numb with shock. Instinctively, he spun round in fright and saw a girl standing in front of Mrs. Saw's house. "Next time you're feeling peckish, ask a grown-up, don't go stealing. It's naughty, that is." The girl looked stern, but her voice was soft, though still strong enough to reprimand a thief caught red-handed like Who. Yes, I understand. I'm sorry, miss, I'll put it all back." "No need, just wait there, I'll get you some more sweets." Then the girl went inside the house. Who felt like he'd been brought back from the dead. He breathed a sigh of relief. Phew, I thought I was done for. This would have got back to my parents and I'd have been in right trouble. But in every misfortune, there's a silver lining, and he even had the foresight to bring a carrier bag to put the sweets in. Before he could celebrate, who suddenly shuddered. He realized that he'd been waiting for the girl for over 15 minutes and there wasn't a peep from inside. He guessed it must be past 10 p.m. His calves were being devoured by mosquitoes. He winced, scratching away and glancing around. He waited for another 5 minutes, but there was still no sign of her. He decided to head back. Mate! Long Mom! You lot! Who, all smiles, passed his spoils over the fence to Long Mom, who immediately told him off. Keep your voice down, will you? She'll hear us and we'll all be in trouble. Hurry up and climb out. You don't need to worry. I'll tell you all about it when I get out. Who had barely landed on the ground when T-Ho accosted him. What were you doing in there for so long? We were waiting for ages. Why did you go out and then back in? Who were you waving your arms around and talking to? You saw that, did you? I was just about to tell you. I was getting ready to leave when this girl called me back. I thought I'd been caught red-handed. She must be Mrs. Saw's daughter or something. She said I should ask next time instead of stealing. Then she told me to wait there so she could go in and get me some more sweets. But I was waiting too long and the mosquitoes were biting me, so I just left. What? As Who finished his story, Long Mom and T-Ho were shocked into silence, staring at each other in disbelief. Their faces suddenly paled and they looked nervously towards Mrs. Saw's house. Seeing that the door was firmly shut, a shiver involuntarily ran down their spines. You're saying a girl came out and spoke to you? Yeah, that's right. The girl must be about the same age as you lot. T-Ho swallowed hard, his face ashen, and looked at Long Mom. Let's get out of here, sharpish. On the rough dirt road, the hurried footsteps of T-Ho seemed to be leading him back to a distant memory. That year, he and Long Mom were about the same age as the younger lads were now. They were a gang of 7 or 8 from the village, gathering to rob a spirit house when they saw Brother RM running back, out of breath, and stopping in front of Mrs. B.A.'s shop to report his news. Have you not heard the news? Mrs. Saw's daughter's hanged herself. Mrs. B.A.'s shop was the local hub, a place that catered to everyone, from drinkers to gamblers to those interested in betting on football matches. When the group heard the news, they all rushed down to the bottom of the street to see if it was true. Of course, Long Mom's and T-Ho's gang were among them. When they got there, they saw a crowd gathered outside Mrs. Saw's house. In the old days, her plot was known for being one of the largest, but she'd sold some of it off, so all that remained was a traditional 2-roomed house and a garden of over 200 square meters, where she grew vegetables and fruit trees. She and her husband had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The son was studying abroad, and the youngest was just 18. No one knew why she'd done it. T-Ho and Long Mom tried to squeeze through the crowd to get a better look, but were stopped by the police. But they did manage to see the pair of feet dangling by the window. Mrs. Saw was so distraught at her daughter's tragic death that she fainted on the spot, causing widespread panic, and people rushed to take her to the infirmary. Mr. Saw sat on the ground, staring blankly at the hanging corpse. The scene was one of utter devastation, enveloping the house, which already had an eerie atmosphere in the moonlight. At this point, local residents, local militiamen, and police were deployed to secure the scene and disperse the crowd. The villagers felt a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity, so everyone tried to stay as long as possible, hanging around and gossiping until late into the night before finally heading home. The incident shook the entire region for a long time. As well as the morbid curiosity, everyone was saddened by the death of the gentle, beautiful girl who had chosen such a tragic end at such a young age. T-Ho and Long Mom later gleaned information from the village gossips. The reason for Mrs. Saw's daughter's suicide was that she'd been jilted. She'd apparently fallen in love with a man 10 years her senior. It had all started when the two of them had met at a summer activity at the pagoda. Their beautiful romance had lasted just a year when the man suddenly disappeared without a trace. When he reappeared, he confessed to her that he was about to get married. On that fateful evening, when she went to meet him to receive the devastating news, Mr. and Mrs. Saw were at the pagoda, praying for their daughter's health and well-being, as they had noticed that she had been sad and lethargic lately, always sitting in a daze, a far cry from her usual energetic and cheerful self. Mrs. Saw had tried to coax the information out of her, but she had brushed it off, giving vague answers. Little did they know that, upon their return, they would witness such a horrific scene. After the ceremony, Mrs. Saw went to tidy her daughter's room and found the suicide note that she had left for her parents. The letter recounted all the details, and Mr. and Mrs. Saw finally understood everything. They were both saddened and enraged by the two-timing man. The tragic tale seemed to have come to a close once the public's morbid curiosity had been satisfied. But no, that night, the wife of Ton SC was given a shock. It was nearly midnight and her husband hadn't returned home yet. This guy was a notorious boozer, and most days, after helping out on building sites, he would drop by the pub at the bottom of the street for a few with his mates, never getting home until 8 or 9 p.m. But tonight, it was after 11 p.m. and there was still no sign of him. Mobile phones weren't common in those days, so Mrs. THM could only contact her husband through Faith, or by sending a message with one of her friends from the bottom of the street if she happened to see them. Getting impatient, she asked her younger brother to go with her to the bottom of the street to look for her husband. It was late, and everyone had locked their doors and bolted their windows. The dim light from the street lamps barely lit the scene, creating a murky, eerie atmosphere. As they got to the end of the dirt road, Mrs. THM's younger brother suddenly stopped and shouted, "Sis, someone's lying in front of Mrs. Saw's house." Mrs. THM was startled and followed the direction he was pointing in. After squinting to focus, she cautiously went over to see who was lying motionless on the ground. "Oh, heavens above! Ton!" Mrs. THM exclaimed in shock as she recognized her husband and frantically grabbed his arm, shaking him hard. Wake up, Ton!" Seeing that his brother-in-law wasn't responding, Tin slapped him hard on the face a few times. Stung by the pain, Ton groggily opened his eyes. Just then, Mrs. THM put her face close to his. You're awake. Tin, Ma. Mrs. THM cried out in terror and recoiled, pushing them both away, and ran away screaming, alerting the whole neighborhood, who switched on their lights and opened their doors in alarm. No one knew what was going on, they just saw Mrs. THM and Tin chasing after Ton. Ton, who was drunk, had run out of steam by the time he got to Mrs. BA's house and lost his balance, falling headfirst into the gatepost. Luckily, Mrs. BA's son managed to catch him. Help me, CNG. Ghosts? What ghosts? It's your wife and Tin, what ghosts are you talking about? Ton heard this and finally came to his senses. He strained his eyes to get a good look at the angry face of his wife, getting closer by the second. Everyone knew that Ton was afraid of his wife. But now, he was thankful for this very real fear more than the vague, eerie fear he had felt earlier. You need to stop drinking so much. You've already had your kidney blocked, haven't you? You spent a fortune in the hospital and you still haven't learned your lesson? And tonight, you've gone and got drunk and slept in front of Mrs. Saw's house. If Tin and I hadn't gone looking for you, you'd have been lying there all night, getting pneumonia and dying. Tom was happier than ever to hear his wife scolding. At least he knew he was still safe and sound. No, it's not like that, love. I saw a ghost earlier, I was so scared that I passed out and don't remember anything else. Oh, I know you too well. If you're lying, may a car run you over. I still get goosebumps when I think about it. I had a few with Bin earlier, and I left to go home at about 9 p.m. Then, as I was walking past Mrs. Saw's house, I heard someone call my name, Ton, clear as day. I looked around but I couldn't see anyone. Then I heard another call, Ton, and I spun around and saw. I saw the ghost standing in front of the gate, didn't I? A hoarse voice rang out, making the crowd jump and turn all their eyes to behind Mrs. THM. The one who had spoken was Mr. NMQ, who was slowly coming forward as everyone waited with bated breath and Ton SC's lips trembled. "How did you know that, Mr. NM? You act like I wanted to know. I'm still scared to death when I think about it." About a week ago, Mr. NMCC visited Mr. Chin Bu's house with a few other old blokes to discuss the village festival. After that, they had a few drinks and didn't finish until after 10 p.m. As he was walking past Mr. Saw's house, Mr. NM. The acrid taste made him reluctant to light another cigarette when he suddenly heard someone call, "Chu NM, Uncle NM." Ong NM looked around, bewildered, but saw no one. He frowned, assuming he must have misheard. As he was about to move on, the voice rang out again. "Chu NM," this time crystal clear, as if someone from Ba Saw's house was calling him. Ong NM turned around, startled and horrified to see TH standing at the gate. Her face was deathly pale, her eyes vacant as she looked at him and offered a sad smile. "Chu NMI, Uncle NM." Ong NM could only bear to hear that much before he recoiled in panic, tripping over a rock and nearly falling backwards. Luckily, his agility saved him, and he managed to brace himself before hobbling away as fast as he could. Behind him, he heard a ringing laugh. "I reckon she still holds a grudge against that TNG, so her spirit hasn't moved on. She calls out to anyone who passes by. But who is TNG, Chu NM? Why, he's the heartless GIT who jilted her. Don't you know the worst thing someone can do? To die young and hang yourself. Her spirit is strong. That lad had better watch out, she'll make his life a misery." Ong NM spoke while staring intently at Ton SC, causing the man to become uneasy and defensive. "Why are you saying she'll haunt me? You're not cursing me, are you, Chu NM? I'm talking about that TNG bloke. Why would she bother haunting you? But you should still be careful. There's a reason she showed herself to you. Try to avoid that section near Ba Saw's house. I certainly won't be going near there again. I've lived for 60 years, I just want to live out my remaining days in peace." Ton SC might have been fabricating the story to fool his wife, but Ong NM's unwavering account, along with similar details in both tales, made the entire neighborhood suspicious and led to lively discussions. They suspected the lingering spirit of the young, unfortunate girl was unable to move on due to her overwhelming hatred and was now resting in her own home. From that point on, rumors and terrifying tales of the young girl's spirit began to spread. Children like Longmom and Tiho were strictly forbidden from going anywhere near the house. It seemed that, as usual, even the most terrifying stories eventually fade, but not this one. It was rekindled by the same person who had started it all. On the anniversary of TH's death, the unfaithful TNG unexpectedly appeared, looking contrite and regretful, but he couldn't soften the bitter gaze of his former fellow Buddhists. His wife was standing, hands clasped, in front of TH's altar. "You scumbag!" On DNG, the group leader was incensed and wanted to attack TNG, but the others restrained him, fearing he would be too angry and something serious would happen. "Get out! How dare you come back here? Someone as rotten as you won't atone for your sins even after 10 lifetimes. I've never seen a man as heartless and vile as you. Let me go, I need to give him a beating." The other brothers held on DNG back but didn't forget to warn TNG, "Rest assured, the wicked are always punished, retribution will come soon. As for you, get out of TH's house." Seeing how furious his former Buddhist brothers were, TNG didn't dare say a word and hurriedly left. The relatives of Ong and Ba Saw were just as outraged, but because it was TH's death anniversary, they reminded each other to restrain themselves. TNG stood near the star apple tree for a long time before finally leaving. But as soon as the sound of a motorbike started, the incense burner on TH's altar burst into flames, shocking everyone. Fortunately, On DNG spotted it immediately and dealt with it quickly. Ong and Ba Saw, witnessing the scene, embraced each other, sobbing, believing it was their daughter's spirit. After the couple calmed down, DNG explained that after TH's tragic passing, he had immediately investigated. He had never believed that the handsome, kind man who was always willing to help others in the group could be so heartless. But then his last shred of hope had been shattered when he heard TNG's neighbors and friends say that he was a gambler, addicted to football and betting, never missing a thing. Even his attendants at the pagoda had an ulterior motive. At home, he was constantly harassed by loan sharks, so he took refuge wherever he could, dodging them as much as possible. But he couldn't hide forever. The loan sharks were quick to track him down, so he caught a bus south. He cut off all contact with his family, and, of course, with TH. Later, he heard rumors that he was living with a female restaurant owner who had been married before. This was why he had returned to TH and insisted on breaking up. I was planning to keep it a secret from you too because I didn't want to remind you of TH's sadness. But seeing that man's face just now made me so angry. The atmosphere became somber. Occasionally, someone would click their tongue and sigh with sorrow as they looked up at the altar, where the photograph of the young girl still stood, robbed of her youth by a worthless man. That evening, DNG returned home. While he was helping his wife tidy up, Van, a member of the Buddhist group, called with shocking news. TNG had died in a car accident that afternoon. His body had been taken to his parents' house. The group members were stunned and immediately called each other and went to TNG's house. There, they heard the heartbreaking cries of TNG's parents and saw a woman sitting numbly beside his body. DNG asked around and learned that she was the female restaurant owner who had been living with TNG. She tearfully told everyone that TNG had been bringing her to meet his parents to discuss their wedding plans. However, about a month earlier, he had said he kept dreaming about a girl standing in front of his house, calling his name repeatedly. Then, a week before the trip, he dreamt every night of the same car accident. She had felt uneasy when he told her, thinking it was a bad omen before the journey, and had advised him against going, but he brushed it off. He had insisted on visiting his parents and was then killed in a tragic accident. The Buddhist group members all had goosebumps. Although they didn't dare say it, they all secretly believed it was more than just an accident. TNG's death once again shocked the area and caused much speculation about the spirit of the unfortunate girl, sparking the curiosity of the children, Long Mom and T-Ho. Of course, they wouldn't dare enter Ba Saw's house to investigate, even for money, so they had to suppress their curiosity for many years. Until the day they tricked Hu and Hai into going to Ba Saw's house to steal the pineapples. The plan had been hatched at the start of the summer holidays, they were just waiting for the right time to implement it. Long Mom and T-Ho wanted to find out if TH's spirit was still lingering there, as the rumors claimed, so they tricked Hu and Hai into going into Ba Saw's house. It was like killing two birds with one stone. But now, listening to Hu's story, their faces were ashen, and they kept glancing around nervously, trying to get home quickly as if something were chasing them. Long Mom recalled that when TH's tragic incident had occurred, Hu and the others had been very young and couldn't possibly have known about it. And they certainly hadn't heard the adults talking about it, because if they had, they wouldn't have dared to go into Ba Saw's house. Hu's innocent and naive mention of the sister who gave him sweets terrified Long Mom and T-Ho. It was even more frightening because Ong and Ba Saw had not lived in that house for a long time. Their son had graduated, found a stable job abroad, returned to ask his parents for permission to marry, and then taken them both to live with him so he and his wife could care for them. After TNG's death, coupled with all the gossip and speculation, Ong and Ba Saw became convinced that their daughter was a spirit. The spirit had finally ended its worldly entanglements, and they felt relieved and agreed to move abroad to live with their son. They left the house to Ong Saw's younger sister, Ba Lut, who visited every day to burn incense for TH and occasionally hired someone to clean the house. Therefore, there was no way any girl would dare to go there late at night, except for a figure that had been lingering there for a long time. On T, brother T? What are you doing, walking around like a zombie? Here, take this cake and eat it. Oh, no, I don't want it. You guys share it. And listen. What happened tonight? Don't tell anyone, understand? It's late, you kids should go home. Bye. Hai was puzzled by the nervous expressions and anxious behavior of his two respected older brothers as they went into the house. But with their youthful minds and a lack of life experience, the group didn't pay much attention. In fact, they were pleased they didn't have to share the cake with their older brothers. Music, who excitedly took his loot home and managed to fool his parents by saying Tiho had bought it for him. Because it was the summer holiday, his parents weren't strict about his bedtime, they just reminded him to wash and go to sleep. Who quickly ate a few of the four-season sweets and went to bed. But as he was dozing off, he suddenly heard a knock at the door, startling him. He thought it strange, he never locked his bedroom door. Usually, if his parents wanted to come in, they would just push it open. "If you want to come in, the door's not locked," he mumbled sleepily as he closed his eyes. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a creaking sound. The old hinges were like that, he always knew when someone was opening the door. However, he waited and waited, but he didn't hear his mother or father speak. Meanwhile, the creaking sound kept going, as if someone was deliberately opening and closing the door. Hu sat up, annoyed, and was startled to see someone standing in the doorway, which was now wide open. Long hair covered her face. He was so scared he wet himself. His lips trembled, and he wanted to shout for his mother, but his throat was constricted. The figure suddenly raised a hand, and a gust of wind swept in, blowing the hair away to reveal a pale face, terrifying Hu. "Sweets," she said. "Why did you go home? I told you to wait. I brought sweets for you." Hu recognized that it was the sister from Ba Saw's house, but she looked terrifying. Her face was pale, her eyes were wide and staring, and her limbs were limp. "Here are your sweets. Eat them." Her ringing laughter was deafening, causing Hu to panic and retreat to the corner, screaming, "Mum, help me. Mum. Hu, what's wrong? What nightmare are you having? Get up, Hu." Ko Tui, Auntie Tui, Hu's mum, slapped her son hard on the face, because he wouldn't open his eyes no matter how much she shook him. He was thrashing around wildly. "Auntie Tui. Ma. Ma," he stammered. "What? What are you shouting about? You've been watching those silly films, then having nightmares. Hurry up, the others are waiting outside." Yes, I know. And why are sweet wrappers on the floor? Ants will get in. You must keep things clean." Hu frowned, confused by his mother's nagging, but when he looked down at the floor, he saw several four-season sweet wrappers. He was certain he had left the sweets downstairs. Hu closed his eyes, shook his head, and tried to clear his head. The horrifying dream from the night before flashed through his mind, filling him with fear. Ko Tui frowned as she bent down to collect the sweet wrappers, not forgetting to scold her son. "Go and wash your face quickly. They're waiting for you." Yes. He reluctantly got up, washed his face, and went downstairs, where his friends were waiting on the porch. "What's wrong with you? You look like a ghost." "He's gone crazy from playing too much." Hu acted like a zombie all day. Usually, he was competitive and argumentative, but today, he didn't care when his friends thrashed him at video games. Later, the others suggested going to play in the fields, but Hu said he was tired and went home. He couldn't even finish a bowl of rice. He felt weak and uncomfortable, and his mother asked him in concern, "Eat up, why are you just staring at it?" "I think I'm getting a cold, Mum. I feel so tired." "It's your fault for playing too much. Try to eat some rice, and I'll buy you some medicine. And don't go playing in the sun at midday." Hu mumbled in agreement and quickly finished his half-eaten bowl of rice. He wearily went to his room, flopped onto the bed, closed his eyes, and felt dizzy, as if he had been spinning around in circles. Suddenly, he heard a knock at the door. The terrifying images from last night's dream flashed through his mind, causing him to jump and shrink back against the wall, staring fearfully at the door. "Hu, open the door and take your medicine," his mother's voice called. "Why is it locked?" Ko Tui's voice pulled Hu back to reality. He rubbed his face, trying to dispel the haze, then reluctantly went to open the door. "Here, son. Take this medicine." Hu grasped the door with one hand and reached through the gap for the medicine with the other, when suddenly a pale hand grabbed his tightly and pulled him hard. Hu was caught off guard and lost his balance, stumbling forward. As he looked up, he saw the terrifying face of the sister from his dream. She gripped Hu's hand tightly, pulling him closer. "Laughter, here are your sweets. Eat them." She burst into ringing laughter. Her wide, staring eyes bored into Hu's terror as she grabbed his mouth and stuffed a handful of brightly colored wrapped sweets inside, then laughed again in a terrifying way. Hu tried to struggle free from her icy grip, but he couldn't. His mouth was full of sweets, and his cries were just muffled, helpless sounds. "Hu, get up, son!" Hu was shaken awake, covered in sweat, his eyes darting around the room. "What nightmare are you having now?" Once again, Ko Tui's voice pulled Hu out of his nightmare. He clutched his chest, panting, and stared at his mother, who looked concerned. "What's wrong, son? Are you feeling very unwell? Should I take you to the doctor?" "No, I was just having a bad dream." "Okay, then. Try to drink your medicine and get some sleep." Hu was still filled with fear, but the medicine made him drowsy, and after half an hour of tossing and turning, trying to push those terrifying images out of his mind, he finally fell asleep. Around 11 p.m., Ko Tui finished sewing the clothes that she needed to deliver to a client the next day. She tied it up and went to check on her son, but was shocked to find he wasn't in his room. She quickly checked the front door and found it was still locked from the inside. "Hu, Hu," she called as she walked through the house, but there was no response. Just then, she heard a rustling sound coming from the kitchen. She rushed down there, turned on the light, and saw Hu sitting on the doorstep that led to the back garden. "Oh my God, Hu, what are you doing there?" Hu was sitting with his back to her, and didn't respond when she spoke. His hands were moving up and down repeatedly. She went over and shook him. Hu suddenly shuddered, turning around to face her. His face was deathly pale, his eyes were wide and staring, and his mouth was full of dirt, causing her to scream in terror and fall backwards. Hu, with his mouth full of dirt, burst into ringing laughter. The sound, as if echoing from a distant world, terrified Ko Tui. She retreated in panic under the bright kitchen light, but everything in front of her seemed shrouded in a cold mist that rose over her goosebump-covered hands. "Want sweets? Want cake?" The voice was no longer Hu's childish voice, but a rasping sound, as if someone was strangling him. He held out his dirt-covered hands, gesturing as if offering something. Ko Tui, still in shock, didn't know what to do when suddenly Hu put his hands on the ground and crawled quickly towards her. Min, Hu's father, was working a night shift, so she was alone in the house. Hearing Ko Tui scream, the neighbors ran over and banged on the door. "Oh my God, what's happened, Tui?" Ko Nm, Thanti Nm, the neighbor's call, brought Ko Tui back to her senses. Her legs shaking, she struggled to her feet and ran outside. Ko Tui frantically pulled the door open with trembling hands. Standing right in front of her were Ko and Chu Nm, Uncle and Auntie Nm, her neighbors. Ko ran to them, breathless, and tried to explain. He's stuffing dirt in his mouth, Ko Nm. His eyes are rolled back like this. I don't know what's wrong with him. Please help me." "What? Who's stuffing dirt in their mouth?" "Who, my son?" The neighbors started to switch on their lights and come out of their houses, including Long Mom, and Ho. Chu Nm, who played the A with grave N Ko, a traditional stringed instrument, at funerals, immediately suspected that Hu was possessed by a spirit when he heard Ko Tui's description. During his career, he had seen many similar cases, some with even more terrifying symptoms. "Calm down. Do you know where he's been playing recently? At a temple, pagoda, or even a cemetery? I suspect he's been possessed." Long Mom was startled by Chu Nm's question and looked at Ho. Ko Tui, still in a state of panic, didn't know how to answer, but then she saw Hai standing near the gate and asked him directly. "Where have you been going lately? Anywhere special?" No, we've just been hanging around the village. We haven't been to any temples or pagodas. There's nowhere to play there anyway. What's wrong with who, Co? People were gathering in increasing numbers, but after hearing the story, they hesitated to look inside. Let me come in and take a look, Chu NM said. Let's have a look and see what's what first, then we'll decide what to do, a sonorous voice declared, startling the crowd, who turned to see it was Miss B.Y., a renowned and highly skilled sorceress from the next village. Her virtuous reputation had spread far and wide, thanks to her success in resolving numerous tricky and unusual cases. Many locals with family matters involving the spirit world had sought her assistance, so her appearance was met with sighs of relief. The only mystery was how she knew to arrive at precisely the right moment. Miss Twee, who had long heard of Miss B.Y., immediately led her into the house. Hu's gang of mates, including Long Mom and T-Ho, though scared, surreptitiously trailed behind, driven by curiosity. Upon entering the kitchen, they were met with rustling sounds. Hu was sat on the doorstep, staring out at the back garden. Hearing the noise, he whirled around, eyes wide and bulging, clutching a dry piece of wood which he was gnawing on ferociously. This sight terrified Long's gang, who huddled together, afraid to take another step forward. Miss Twee, witnessing her son in this state, felt a mixture of fear and heartache that choked her with emotion. Miss B.Y., however, calmly pulled a chair out from the dining table, sat down, and fixed her gaze on Hu before uttering a statement that left Miss Twee stunned. He's not your son. He's been possessed. Hearing Miss B.Y.'s words, Hu erupted into a chilling laugh. Dirt, chewed firewood, and diluted beetle juice spilled from his smudged mouth. Miss B.Y. maintained her icy composure, her eyes fixed and piercing, before sternly declaring, whether I beat Hu, or rather, whatever is inside his body. She was completely unfazed by its threatening demeanor. In response, it merely smirked contemptuously and hissed through gritted teeth, if you want to hit, hit. If you want to threaten, threaten. Great, just great. Hit him. Hit this rude little wretch. Hit Hu. Its face contorted in fury, eyes bulging, and it pounded its chest repeatedly with both hands. Beetle juice continued to gush out, staining the white shirt it wore. Miss B.Y., if you let the spirit provoke you, it will damage the boy's mortal body. Stop it. All right, speak. Why have you possessed this boy? Hu stopped, glared, twitched his mouth, then pointed directly ahead. They're guilty. They dared to steal my offerings and share them amongst themselves. Upon hearing this, Miss B.Y. and Miss Twee turned sharply to look at Long's gang, who were cowering in fear behind them. Is this true? The group exchanged furtive glances before Hai hesitantly replied to Miss B.Y., Why yes, we didn't know anything. You're not hiding anything, are you? If you are, I can't help your mate. Your mate is possessed by a spirit, you know. Have you lot been taking offerings from the shrines in the temple to eat? Hearing this, Long Mom and T-Ho were taken aback. Of course, they wouldn't dare go to a temple or shrine and pull a stunt like that. However, they had egged on the younger ones to steal offerings from Mrs. Saw's shrine. Who was the one who had leapt in and grabbed all the sweets and cakes from inside the shrine? Both Ty's faces recalled Hu telling them that he had met a girl in Mrs. Saw's house. But who else lived in Mrs. Saw's house other than T.H.? The girl who had hanged herself several years ago. If that were the case, the spirit haunting Hu must be T.H.'s ghost. And no amount of money would make either of them confess, because they were the ones who had devised this game. Their goal was to encourage Hu to go in to see if T.H.'s ghost was real. But as they were still trying to figure out a way to wriggle out of it, Hai suddenly blurted out, I remember. Mrs. Saw's house. Who? Which Mrs. Saw are you talking about? Hai, tell the truth clearly, lad, Miss Twee urged. Hai swallowed hard as he saw the sharp look in Hu's eyes. However, his honest nature, combined with his concern for his friend, gave him the courage to tell the whole story, leaving nothing out. From the fact that the two esteemed older lads had devised this game, to the part where Who, full of bravado, climbed in alone and grabbed all the sweets and cakes from the shrine in Mrs. Saw's garden. Hearing this, Miss Twee turned angrily and pointed at Long Mom and T-Ho. Good heavens, you're grown men, and you encourage the youngsters to play such a silly game. WWE. But Who suddenly burst into delighted laughter, nodding in satisfaction before snapping, did you hear that? There's a reason for everything. You parents don't teach your child, so he goes out and causes mischief. Miss B.Y., who understood the principles of morality very well, realized the truth of the matter after hearing the story, so she turned and scolded the youngsters. You're big lads, why are you egging on your younger brother to play such strange games? This has always been taboo, and you're old enough to know better. Now you see the consequences? Offerings for the spirits are for the spirits to enjoy. You're not allowed to take them, do you hear? Then she gently looked at Who, the youngsters are young and naive. Come now, spirit, don't be too harsh. I'll tell the youngsters to offer prayers of apology to the departed. No, I want each of them to be punished. Who shook his head and sneered, gradually standing up and growling. His face darkened as he charged towards the group, causing Long's gang to panic and scatter. Miss B.Y. remained unfazed, her expression still icy. She made a hand gesture, closed her eyes, and began to mutter something. Just as Who was about to grab her throat, he suddenly collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony. After a moment, he struggled to sit up, clutching his chest and pleading frantically with Miss B.Y., leaving everyone astonished. I beg you, please forgive me. I'm in too much pain, please forgive me. Do you know you've done wrong? They have repented and are willing to offer apologies, so why do you still want to harm them? Miss B.Y. sat up straight, regal as a monarch of old. She gritted her teeth, her voice deep and unusual, but the sound that emerged was powerful, terrifying the spirit, as demonstrated by the flustered expression on Who's face. The spirit knows it's done wrong. Please forgive me. Music, very well, then. Would you like to go to the temple to cultivate virtue, reduce your ghostly essence, and await reincarnation? I will listen to you, Your Excellency. Hearing the spirit's response, Miss B.Y. nodded slightly, her face softening. She made a hand gesture and placed 2 fingers on Who's forehead. Music, as she finished speaking, Who shuddered several times, swayed back and forth, then suddenly fell backwards. Fortunately, Miss Twee rushed forward and caught him in time. After about 5 minutes, he woke up, dazed and confused, not knowing what had happened. Miss B.Y. opened her eyes, looked at Who, and smiled kindly, her posture more relaxed than before, no longer as regal as she had been. Her voice was also gentle, although it sounded as though it wasn't her usual tone. Come closer, I'll cleanse you. Miss Twee helped Who sit closer, and Miss B.Y. took out a small bottle of water about the size of 2 fingers and sprayed it all over him. After that, she placed a string made of 5-colored thread around his neck. I have bathed you in pomelo and cinnamon water to cleanse you. You must always wear this string to prevent evil spirits from possessing you. From now on, do not do foolish and forbidden things, do you hear? Who, although still dazed and not remembering anything, nodded repeatedly when Miss B.Y. mentioned evil spirits. Then she turned to look at Miss Twee and instructed, remember to buy pomelo leaves tomorrow to boil water for him to bathe in. As parents, you must also pay attention and guide your children, and not let them violate taboos. T-Ho and Long Mom, who had witnessed everything from beginning to end, plucked up their courage and crept closer, stammering, Miss, could you give us a string too, please? We're also scared of that ghost haunting us. Miss B.Y. nodded and pointed for the 2 lads to sit down next to Who. She took out 2 more 5-colored strings, but instead of putting them around their necks, she tied them around their wrists and smiled as she stroked each of their heads. Don't do it again, do you hear? The 3 of them clasped their hands, faced the door, and bowed 3 times. The 3 lads immediately did as they were told. Miss B.Y. also stood up, closed her eyes, and clasped her hands high above her head, facing the main door, muttering something. After that, she sat back down in her chair, wiped her face to wake herself up, then spoke. That's done, Don't repeat it again, do you hear? This one was possessed by a spirit, he's prone to being spooked, so I gave him a string to wear around his neck. As for the two of you, you haven't been possessed yet, so just wearing it on your wrist is enough. Yes, we know we were wrong, it was just our curiosity. We heard before that Mrs. Saw's daughter's spirit was still in the house. We wanted to see if it was real, so we devised the plan to steal from the shrine and let who go in to check. Ah, I see. Oh, miss, was the spirit that possessed who Mrs. Saw's daughter, Th? No, it wasn't. In fact, the spirit of the poor girl Th came to me for help. Thanks to that, I knew to come here and save you all. Everyone was shocked by Miss B's answer because until now, everyone had assumed that the haunting spirit was Th, Mrs. Saw's daughter, who had possessed who to punish him for daring to steal offerings from the shrine. Then Miss By began to recount the story. Music, earlier, I was in the house reading scriptures. I saw a spirit loitering in front of the gate and asked it in to talk. I found out that it was Th, the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Saw. The poor, short-lived girl from years ago. Th said that there was a female demon following and harming people, and asked Miss By for help, otherwise that person would be in danger, and then she led me to who's house. On the way, Th told me that on the night of the full moon, when who went into her house to take things from the shrine, there was also a female demon residing there. Fearing that the demon would harm people, Th deliberately possessed an owl to scare who away, but he was stubborn. In the end, after taking all the cakes and sweets from the shrine, he was possessed by that female demon and followed her home. Who was possessed while waiting for his sister to give him sweets, and the sister he met was the female demon who had transformed and manifested herself. Pausing for a moment, Miss By continued, Mrs. Saw's house has been uninhabited for a long time, the land is deserted, and no deities are in charge. The positive energy is too low, so it's inevitable that demons and ghosts will reside there. This female demon was originally just an ordinary spirit, but then it became a hungry ghost due to neglect. People occasionally come to Mrs. Saw's house to burn incense on the altar for her daughter. Each full moon, offerings of cakes and fruit are made outside the shrine, so the spirit is nourished and enjoys the offerings. Over time, it became a female demon. Th's spirit has been in Dngzhong for a very long time, but thanks to her kind nature, she isn't too demonic. And if she isn't too demonic, she doesn't have enough negative energy to drive away the female demon. In the end, the girl had to come and find me for help. Hearing this, Miss Twee sighed and looked at the gate with a dazed expression before turning to Miss By. Thank you, Miss By, for helping my family. Thank you to the spirit of Th for helping us. But that poor girl's life was very difficult, Miss By. I remember that she committed suicide because of a broken heart. Heavens, her scoundrel boyfriend died in a car accident. People also rumored that it was because Th's spirit was haunting him and pushing him. It wasn't. That's why, when it comes to spirituality, some people believe it, and some don't. But when it can't be explained by common sense, they blame it on ghosts and demons. I've also heard people rumor this, but I find it very illogical. Music, recalling the old story, when she was at Miss By's house earlier, she was curious about the death of TNG, so Th recounted that on the anniversary of her death, TNG had come to ask to burn incense, but Mr. and Mrs. Saw and everyone else had refused to let him and had chased him away. When he went outside to get his vehicle, he stood under the star apple tree and prayed silently. I know it's my fault, and I regret it very much. I've been tormented all this time and haven't had a good night's sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see you. I vowed a long time ago that after paying off all my debts, I'll commit suicide to atone for my sins, to be able to take care of you for the rest of my life, to make up for the mistakes I made to you. Then he confessed everything from years ago. At that time, Th only knew about a breakup message and an announcement that he was getting married. He said that he had fled to the south and got a job as a waiter in a bar. Then one time, he went to eat at a cheap eatery, and thanks to his handsome looks, tall stature, and smooth talking, he had completely won the heart of Dip, the owner of the eatery. Dip had been married once before, but her husband had unfortunately died in an accident when they didn't have any children yet. He and Dip dated for a while and then moved in together. At this time, he was still cutting off all contact with his family, including TH. After a few months, when things seemed to be going smoothly, he went back to visit his parents, reassuring them to put their minds at ease that he was still doing well, but that he didn't know when his debts would be paid off. After that, he made a date to meet TH, but he only made up a few excuses about his disappearance for the past few months and then took the initiative to break up so that she could find someone better. He knew that he had no way back and that it would be a very long time before he could return here, when the large debt was proportional to his wandering days in that land. He knew that the longer he dragged on, the more he would only make TH suffer. It was better to be decisive so that TH could find a more complete happiness, even though he still loved her very much. However, he didn't expect that TH loved him so much and chose the most foolish way to forget this troubled love affair. When he heard the news that TH had committed suicide, he regretted it very much. He confided in his friends that he had no other choice when he said goodbye. Although deep down, he had thought about a happy and fulfilling life with TH. He had lived in the temple long enough to learn many of the teachings of Buddhism, to understand the law of cause and effect, but he reassured himself that retribution usually comes late. And if he himself didn't hurry up and run away now, the gangsters would come even faster than retribution. TH's death made him realize the truth, and he was tormented. Every night, he lay down and saw the image of TH hanging herself. Then he saw his parents having to kneel down and beg the gangsters not to cause trouble and throw dirty things into the house. From then on, he was determined to change. He thought about working in the bar, cleaning up the shop every day and taking advantage of going to the wholesale market to transport goods for small traders. He knew he had made a mistake once. Now, if he continued to fall into depravity in that land, only heaven could save him. He couldn't let Dip down, and he didn't want anyone to suffer because of him like his parents or TH. So, he worked day and night, doing whatever he was asked to do. He saved half of his earnings to give to Dip and half to send back to his parents, managing to pay off some of the money to the gangsters. As time passed, the debts were paid off, but the remorse and torment increased, and in the end, he chose the anniversary of TH's death to atone for her. TH was in the house listening to everything, but she was very upset and couldn't stop him because she was being punished by the high-ranking official for bearing a heavy burden of filial impiety for committing suicide before her parents, so she couldn't leave the house. TH wanted to tell him that she didn't hate him anymore. Seeing that he had changed and had a peaceful life with Dip, she also secretly wished them both happiness. Even so, he muttered a long speech, looked at TH's house for a moment longer, then got in his vehicle and sped away. 2 rows of tears had run down his cheeks, then mixed with blood when he crashed straight into a truck parked on the side of the road. So, TNG paid off his debt to TH, didn't he? Yes, but he incurred a debt to someone else. Miss BY's exclamation made the atmosphere heavy. As a woman herself, Miss Twee had enough empathy to know who Miss BY was referring to. The youngsters, on the other hand, didn't know what the adults were thinking, but they suddenly felt very sorry for TH and no longer felt scared. Long Mom and T-Ho looked at each other and then spoke up, breaking the silence. Miss BY, is there any way for us to thank TH? We feel too guilty. Of course, there is. From now on, you lads should go to her house every day to burn incense and clean her altar, she instructed. Hearing this, Long Mom turned to look at each of his comrades. Every one of them nodded happily. Yes, we can do that. Oh, but only during the day, okay? Yes. Let me ask TH's family for permission first. Catching sight of Mr. Saw's younger sister, who had been lurking outside for a while now, Miss BY led the youngsters over and told her everything, not forgetting to instruct her to burn incense regularly and not let the altar get cold. There must be someone in the house every day, and occasionally cook something to keep the kitchen warm. Mrs. Lunn listened to the story and fell silent, feeling sorry for her short-lived niece, who always had a kind nature. Anyone else would have been doubted, but Mrs. Lunn completely trusted Miss BY. Because she had solved the problem of a marriage based on fate in the afterlife for her son, Tun, her only son, from a tall, handsome young man. That year, after returning from an internship teaching in the mountains, he suddenly went mad. He was shirtless all day, with a wandering look on his face, loitering on the street. Mrs. Lun painfully took her son to be treated at major hospitals, and even sought out famous shamans, but no one could solve the problem. And later, the last person Mrs. Lun took Tun to see was Miss B.Y. She immediately realized that Tun was being possessed by an afterlife lover. She wanted Tun to return to the mountains to live with her, which was why he had gone crazy like that. Within 10 days, Miss B.Y. performed 2 rituals to drive the female spirit away. Tun also recovered afterwards, and now he has a wife and children. The little ones are so sincere. Do you think it's all right? Yes, I'm always willing to do whatever Miss B.Y. says. I'm really old now, and I can't clean up and stand up and sit down a lot every day. It would be helpful to have the young ones helping out. The next morning, seeing Long Mom and T Ho excitedly gathering in front of her house, Mrs. B.A. immediately cautiously inquired. "Oh, where are you lads going, so excited?" "Yes, we're waiting for everyone to be here so we can go clean TH's shrine." "Oh, TH, the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Saw." Although Mrs. B.A. had been present outside Hu's house last night, she hadn't witnessed the events inside. Now, her nosy nature resurfaced. "Oh, did Miss B.Y. go into a trance last night, lads?" "I didn't let his meddlesome nature be outdone." "Oh, Miss B.Y. is really amazing. She kept changing her voice. Sometimes she sat on the chair, leaning on her arms like Emperor Qianlong sitting. That's how it was on the throne. And then, when she chased the demon away, she sat back normally, but her voice was really strange, softer than the deep, gruff voice she used when talking to the demon. But I reckon neither of those voices were her real voice, you know? I could just tell. It was only when she was telling Mrs. Lutt that she spoke in her normal voice. B.A., being someone who understood spiritual matters, listened to Hai and explained, "Blimey, she's a right one, she is. Having 2 entities in one body ain't easy, and to have TNPHMU as well, that's something else." "Eh? Who are TNPHMU, BABA?" TNPH is the one she was channeling when she sat up straight, propping herself up like a king. This bloke has a big influence, that's why he was able to drive the demon away. And AMU is the one she was channeling after she chased the demon away, which is why her voice was softer. Well, that's my guess anyway. But if I'm right, she's incredibly skilled. Not everyone is destined to worship TNPHMU and then let them inhabit their body. As BABA said this, Hai, QE and Hu turned up. Seeing that they had a decent number of people, Long Mom gave the signal for them all to head over to BA Saw's house. When they arrived, Mrs. Lutt was already waiting at the gate. A little while later, Kobai also came over. The youngsters each lit a stick of incense, stood in front of TH's altar, and clasped their hands together in prayer. "Yes, we thank you, TH, for your help." Once that was done, the group split up, each taking on a task, cleaning the altar and sweeping the house. But they didn't notice that the ash from the incense sticks they had just placed in the incense burner had all curled over to form the same circular shape. Only Kobai nodded and smiled at the strangeness of it all. Oi, after that, did Kobai say what the meaning of the incense ash curling over into a circle was? Who replied, it's THS spirit speaking in the incense burner. There you go, that's proof for us. Hai suddenly exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. Oi, tomorrow's the full moon, should we go back to BCom and relive the old memories? Hu grimaced and waved his hand dismissively. Nah, once was enough for me, I'm not playing silly buggers again. Let's just tidy up quickly, lads, then we can go and get some noodles. Dear listeners, you have just heard the short story Ko-Hn Meets Ko-Bai. Thank you for listening. We hope to see you again in future works. We wish you a good night's sleep. That's how she was sat on the throne, right? And then when she shooed the demon away, she sat back down all normal-like, but her voice was ever so strange, softer than the deep, gravelly voice she had when she was nattering to the demon. But I reckon neither of those voices were her proper voice, you know? I could just tell, like. It was only when she was telling Mrs. Lutt about it that she spoke in her normal voice. BA, being the spiritually savvy sort, listened to young High and explained, blimey, she's a right one, innit? Having two entities sharing your body isn't exactly a walk in the park, especially when you've got TNPHA involved. Core, that's something else entirely, that is. Eh? Who are these TNPHA then, BA? Is TNPH the one she was channeling when she sat up all proper and regal, propping herself up like a king, that one? This chap clearly carries some hefty weight, which is precisely why he managed to give the demon the old heave-ho. And Mu is the one she was channeling after she gave the demon its marching orders, which is why her voice was softer, like. Well, that's just my hunch, mind. But if I'm on the right track, she's incredibly skilled. Not just anyone has the privilege of worshipping TNPHMU, let alone inviting them in for a bit of a body share. Just as BA uttered these words, young High, QE and Who all rocked up. Spotting that they were now a fairly respectable-sized crew, Long Mom gave the thumbs up, and off they all trooped to BA Saw's gaff. Arriving at the location, they found Mrs. Lutt already patiently stationed at the gate, keeping watch. Then, a bit later on, Ko-Bai swung by for a jolly good chinwag, too. The young uns, each armed with a stick of incense, took their places before TH's altar, joining their hands together in heartfelt prayer and gratitude. Yes, thank you ever so much, TH, for all your invaluable help. Once the prayers were said and done, the gang split up to tackle various tasks, diligently sprucing up the altar and sweeping the house within an inch of its life. Unbeknownst to them, the ashes from the freshly planted incense sticks in the burner had all decided to curl over themselves, forming an identical circular pattern. Ko-Bai, with a knowing twinkle in her eye, simply nodded and cracked a little smile at the peculiarity of it all. Oi, did Ko-Bai have anything to say about those incense ashes all curling up into a circle, then? What did that all mean, eh? Who chimed in? Apparently, it's TH's spirit having a bit of a natter in the incense burner. That's what that is. There you have it, then. Proof positive that she's watching out for us and all. High butted in suddenly, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. Oi, seeing as tomorrow's the full moon and all, should we head back to Becom and relive the glory days? Stir up a bit of nostalgia, eh? Who wrinkled his nose up in disgust, and frantically waved his hand dismissively. Nah, I'm all right, thanks. One stint was more than enough for me, I am not up for playing the silly buggers again. Right, let's get this place tidied up sharpish, lads, then we can all treat ourselves to a tasty bowl of noodles. And so, dear listeners, you have just been regaled with the short tale that is Ko-Hn meets Ko-Bai. We do thank you most kindly for lending us your ears. We sincerely hope to have your company again for future literary escapades. And until then, we wish you the sweetest of slumbers and a peaceful night.